What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Pat Cave. We're here with another video. This time we're going to be talking about a project I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm a huge Lost Boys fan and I've always wanted to make Marko's jacket, and until maybe like around 2010, I want to say around there, don't quote me on that, there was some pictures released of the screen used jackets, two different ones that went up for auction. There was finally some good reference material and photos of those. This is going to be the first video series I want to do where I document making my own Lost Boys jacket. This is going to be the vampire Marko. There's David, Dwayne, Paul, and Marko were the four vampires, not including, the other ones in the film, the Lost Boys. And then this is going to be the start of that series, and we're going to go over what you need to make the jacket and the tapestries that you need, the patches, and basically any of the parts that are going to be required to put your own jacket together. So if that's something that you're interested in, you wanted to do like myself for so many years, so this will be the only video series I've seen so far on YouTube, at least, that shows how to do that, or that talks about it at least. I'm not going to be able to say I'm doing it 100% correctly because I'm learning as I go. We're going to dive into that right after this. What's up, guys? Welcome back. It's been a minute since I made a video. I did my Santa Claus one on the Ashton Drake figure a couple weeks ago. And the reason is I've been putting together like another display that's off camera here. And that's slowly been a long process just because, I needed to collect all the parts, and it's done as of today. So I might do another video on that later on, but if you're here watching this, it's because you want to hear about my project I'm working on. So 1987 comes out, and The Lost Boys, and as far as I'm concerned, the best vampire movie ever made. If you're watching this, you're probably a fan too. And back when those movies came out, so you had the four main vampires, which was David, the leader of the vampires. You had Dwayne, Paul, and then Marko was the one who kind of stood out to me when I was younger. And I think the reason is that in the movie, the vampires all kind of wear black outfits, and they have little different, the costume designer, Susan Becker, kind of gave them each their own individual style, and they kind of had their own flourishes here on their costumes and things, but Marko had the only jacket that really had any color to it. And as someone that likes art too, I could kind of appreciate that it had so many different patterns and textures and colors, and it was always kind of visually appealing to me. And I always wanted to make a replica of that jacket, but there was never very many like reference pictures. And I remember even as a kid, I have a picture here, I'll dig it up before this series is over. And it's basically like a little cartoon I had drawn, back in the day of the Lost Boys. But I wanted to do a little series, like a video series, because I couldn't find anything on YouTube really about anyone making one of these jackets. And this is my first time making one. I'm going off of, the RPF has a ton of resources and a thread about it that's like almost 60 pages long now, but that's where I've gleaned most of my information from. And the members there, super nice people, very helpful, helping you, find some of these things that you need are very hard to find, if not impossible to find. There's a lot of stuff I haven't found, and I'm sure a lot of others haven't been able to locate. Just over the years, it's kind of been lost to time. But I have gotten lucky and scored a few things other members haven't been able to find, so I've been fortunate in that way. But I wanted to do a little video series, and I was thinking for today, I'm going to start with the base jacket. So for anyone that wants to make their own, I figured to do this little video series, so that way you would have something to refer to if you're more of, if you learn better that way, or there's some information you don't want to read through all these pages. My RPF, I'll have some info at least, which will be helpful, hopefully, for people. There was some auctions held maybe like over a decade ago, and there was some more recently, but there was two jackets sold. I don't know if they were screen used, but they were made for the production, I know that much. And one of them was a stunt jacket, one was a hero. Basically, those had very subtle differences, but they are differences, and you could kind of, as far as what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just pick things that I liked about either or, and even the screen used version that he wears in the movie, Alex Winter, and kind of just combine those into like what I like the best, because it's going to be impossible to make it exactly the same. They had to make, you know, the costume designer, I talked to her the other day and she said she made maybe like, I want to say they made 6 different coats, and even those weren't the same, just because I'm sure some of the things they couldn't find exactly the same, a little bit different, but there's other people that have made great replicas, really impressive stuff, especially considering the scope of how many parts there are to this whole thing. So if you want to check out the RPF, there's some members on there that put together some really impressive replicas. So I would recommend checking those out for sure. So I want to format the series and kind of, so the way I'm going to do the videos is I'm going to start with the base jacket, which is, I'll talk about that in a second. I've got 2 of them behind me here. And then the second video, I'm going to talk about the tapestries. They used vintage tapestries, which, you know, back in the day, probably cost next to nothing. I think they even said that in an interview, the costume designer, Susan, or maybe Joel, the director, but I know that they were able to get them dirt cheap, and they had to buy, you know, a minimum of so many for these 6 different coats, or 4, or however many they made. And I've been gathering up, so I've got the base jacket. The second video, I want to talk about the tapestries. The third video will probably go over the patches, which there's about 26 or 27. All of those nowadays, some of them are easier to find than others, and they're around still, which is nice, but I would say more than half aren't around anymore, and they're virtually impossible to find. So there are replicas available, which I'll talk about those 2 because I own some of those. And I'm basically, my plan here is to put this whole jacket together in the base layer and permanently attach the patches that are the vintage ones, the originals that I could find. And then any replica patches I'll probably use as placeholders until I find real ones, and then slowly just kind of swap those out as time goes on, and maybe do like another updated video in a year from now or 2 years from now when I have more original parts on it. Unfortunately, you know, I spent hours looking for certain patches, as have you probably watching this. I was telling my wife the other day, I was looking through, I forgot what website it was. It has 45,000 results though, and I was scrolling. I think I've been scrolling through that for a week, and I still haven't finished all of them. And I found one patch that was one that I was looking for that was used on the jacket originally, and I've only seen maybe one other person that owned the same one. For some reason, they're just not out there anymore. You would think a lot of these would be around more, but nope. Apparently the well has dried up, or they've all just disappeared. I don't know, but for whatever reason, they're impossible to find. Few fortunate individuals have a good deal of vintage stuff, and you know, those people have been collecting a lot longer than I have. I just finally, I remember laying in bed thinking about this project, and I was like, well, it's pretty involved, you know, because I had read over the pages as the years went on of this, the scope of this, and how many different pieces there were. And I haven't really done anything super involved prop projects recently. I did start the Return of the Living Dead zombie barrel, which I'm going to keep doing actually. I know some people asked when there's going to be an update on that, and the parts were being 3D modeled in the lid and everything. And actually the hinge is done, and the little twist locks on the front were modeled and designed. It's mainly the dome that's the last piece, and that was being 3D printed. So as soon as I have all those parts, I'm going to do a second video for that to hopefully show you like where it's at. And then the third one for that will be, you know, completed ideally. Whether it is, I don't know. I hope so though, because I know people are waiting for that. On to Marko's jacket. So the screen used jackets were all a size 40. And that was evidenced by the prop store auction. And you know, the screen used jackets, you could see it just said 40 regular. I think they have a 40 long also available from this style back then, but it was a 40 regular that he had. And Alex Winter was, you know, from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. He's not a very big guy. He's kind of a little on the shorter side. I'm 6'1" and maybe like 195, I would say. So I'm probably quite a bit bigger than he is. These jackets still fit me, but they're a little snug, but I could still get them on. And I actually found the motorcycle gloves that I think are probably what was used in the movie. Those, there's no good reference for or pictures of, but I haven't been able to. But this is based on the screen captures, what I saw, they look to match. And, you know, if you cut, you know, this, we're going to go over this today, but cutting the cuffs off of these coats, the jacket, they were shortened. A member told me because when you put the, you know, the gauntlets on, it basically doesn't like push up against the jacket material, like push your sleeves up. It made sense to me when I got it. And then we're going to be trimming off the bottom too. And I have 2 coats here, and I'll explain the reason for that in just a second, but we're going to go ahead and get started on that soon. Yeah, the next video I'm going to go over the tapestries that you'll need, and which ones are hardest to find. It took me a minute to get all three. There's some helpful people, like I said, that I've been talking to that helped me get some of those items. I'll go over what you need for those. I'm missing one out of 5 of them. That one's pretty much the one that's impossible to find at this point, but there's good replicas for that too. So I'll post links, for those, or a link to the RPF forum too, for people that want to be able to find the reproduction stuff. So your first question when seeing these 2 coats behind me is, why do I have 2 of them, right? Am I making 2 jackets? No. The simple answer is, I kind of can be OCD with certain things when it comes to props. If you collect them, you can probably understand this or relate to this in some degree, but these are the same exact jacket, more or less. One's a little more faded than the other, which is this one. This is the second one I got. And the reason I have 2 of them is because on the screen used coats, Marko's coats, where the collar is, and I'll show some close-up footage here, but there's little notches next to where the collar is here, and it's supposed to have a little couple millimeters of space on each side on the screen used ones. And what happened was, this first one that I got here doesn't really have that, and I don't know why, but it kind of just was slowly driving me crazy the more I'd look at the pictures of the screen used coats. They don't have, there's hardly anything there on the screen used ones. I will say that. Admittedly, there is hardly anything there, but these ones, or this jacket in particular, the first one I got, it has a tiny bit on one side, but the other side is non-existent, as you can see here. It just kind of just goes straight up. There's no notch there. And while we're on the topic, vintage Levi's jackets, they can be pretty expensive. So if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend the kind of money, these jackets go from between maybe like $85 to $200, depending on what it is or the condition. There is an alternative that a member on the RPF pointed out to a lot of us. It's really nice of him to figure this out. But basically, the Gap sells a jacket that's almost identical. The only difference is, strangely enough, it's the notches on the collar here. And that one has a little more space. But, I personally like how that looks, but I'm trying to get everything as authentic as possible. My goal with this whole project was to find the most accurate pieces of this whole thing that I can. You kind of have to, when you start doing something like this, you have to decide, like, well, a lot of these parts are probably not going to be available. The patches, there's certain tapestries you're not going to be able to find, and that's just how it is, sadly, because it's, they're vintage things, they're not around anymore unless you get incredibly lucky. But the Gap jacket is an excellent alternative. I've seen pictures of it, and it's the right kind of color, material. It's got the white on the back of the denim, and it's, a lot less expensive. And if you're primarily going to be using reproduction pieces for this, which you can get of the tapestries mostly and the patches, then maybe you just want to go that route. That's one way to go. A lot of people might be hesitant to cut up like a jacket like this. It's vintage, and this. And while it is, and I'm not going to say it's not without its value. I feel like the value at the end of this project that I'm bringing in by converting this over to what it is going to be a lot higher than what it is currently. These jackets, while they're not super common anymore, you can find them relatively easily. Like, I found these within a couple weeks of each other, the same exact size, just black. One way you can tell the vintage Levi's apart from the the newer ones is the labels. The labels on the new ones, or the tags, are a lot bigger, like almost double the size. And the vintage ones are a lot smaller, and they had an actual jacket size. Like I said, these are size 40. The new ones just say, small, medium, large, extra large probably, but they don't have the coat sizes like I wear a size 40 normally. My tuxedo jacket that I wore to my wedding was a size 40. I think these are a lot more slim fit too as well. And one thing I noticed is this one here, the one I'm going to be selling probably once I'm done, and then selling all my reproduction stuff as like a do-it-yourself Marko Jacket kit on eBay at the end of this whole thing. But this jacket I noticed was a lot more tight in the shoulders when I tried it on, as opposed to this one, which was a little bit more comfortable, and they're marked the same size, but there's obviously little differences here and there. Like I said, the notches on this one, I'm sure that's just up to whoever's sewing it, but this one has better notches. I liked them better, and it's more faded, so it ended up working out better. This one, it's a little darker, and these spots here are basically, doesn't have any notches. It kind of just blends into the collar, and I didn't really like that very much. So today, to start, you're going to need to do a few alterations to the jacket to get it ready for the tapestries and the patches, and I'll go ahead and go over those with you. So we're going to start by removing all the buttons And you're going to need a heavy-duty wire cutter. And a lot of this, like I said, all this information I got from the RPF, talking to members there. There's one member in particular who's offered a lot over the years and put up, you know, he's digitized a lot of the files for the patches to make reproductions to help people that can't find the, you know, the new ones anymore, don't want to spend that kind of money. And he was the one that kind of outlined this process. So thank you to him. He knows who he is. You're going to want to cut off these buttons here, and I'm going to do all this in a minute here, but just to go over outline what we're going to be doing, you're going to want to cut the buttons off. You're going to want to cut the pocket flaps off. The inside pockets here are going to be removed. You're going to need to cut off the bottom of the jacket here, and then also the bottom of the cuffs. So that's kind of like an outline of what today's process is. In the next video, part 2 of this project, we're going to be talking about the tapestries themselves, which ones are hardest to get, how I found mine. A lot of them, you know, clearly most of the stuff's all online unless you happen to walk into an antique store and find something. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so first order of business. So this is a toolbox that I custom built based on Adam Savage's Industrial Light and Magic toolbox. So I keep all my piano pens. We've got files, scissors, Dremel, basically anything hobby related in here. And I put this like custom shelf in here too. And you're going to need, for this project, you're going to need some heavy duty wire cutters. And also these are fabric scissors, so super sharp. And hopefully they can cut through the denim pretty easily, I would think. Okay, so I don't have a good over-the-top camera angle for this, unfortunately, so I can't cut it and hold the camera at the same time. So hopefully you can see enough of what I'm doing that you'll be able to, you know, to do your own take on it. And this isn't, you know, like I said, I'm not like an expert on this or anything. This is my first jacket that I'm doing, so I figured it's kind of like a learning process for me as I go. And I'm going to try and do my best not to make any mistakes in the process, and I'm going to go ahead and start by cutting off all the buttons. So for that part, you're going to use your heavy duty wire cutters, and you are going to cut on the front side as close to the fabric as you can without cutting the fabric. And we're going to go ahead and start there. So it takes a little bit of force, but not too bad. And let's see, you got one off. Yeah. This seems to be stuck a little bit, so you need some pliers to try and grab that part, pull that out. There we go. This takes a little force, but it came right out too. So one down, so leaves a nice clean. Let me bring that up too so you can kind of see there. There we go, fabric's good. I mean, this jacket's supposed to look pretty worn, you know, in the end anyways, but you don't want to cut any seams or anything, because then the kind of will mess up the integrity of the coat itself. You don't want your jacket falling apart after you put all this work into it. I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of these, and then we will catch you in a second. On the original, or I think I saw on one of the Screen Use jackets too, that it had closures sewn on the inside here, like little hooks almost, which I don't plan to do that just because I don't foresee myself ever wanting to have it closed. Or I'm going to put mine on like a half torso mannequin at the end, probably over on the side here somewhere. So I didn't really have any need for that, but that's one option too you could always do once you're done if you want to have it be able to button more. And 2 more buttons there, and then we got the 2 there. Keep an eye out for little pieces of metal too at the end, just because you don't want those all over your house or carpet. Yeah, that one went flying a bit. Let's see, there's that one. So all the buttons are gone. And there's buttons on the side here and on the back. So This part we're going to just cut off though, so you're not going to need to remove those because you're going to cut it off about here. Okay, so we've got all of the buttons removed. So you close up here, remove these. We've removed all the ones along the front. And that's what the back looks like in case anyone was wondering. And like I said, there's some that are on like here on the cuff and then down here. But we're going to be cutting off the bottom of that and then the cuff. So you probably don't need to worry about removing those because it's just going to be gone anyways. So I'll go ahead and get started on that next. So I might start with doing a cuff first. And I think the big thing is you don't want to ever cut along this edge here where this seam is, because this whole thing is going to unravel if you do the stitching here. You don't want to cut that. I've watched a couple of videos, on how to do this, and to get the best fray too, you always want to cut along the meaty part here, but not all the way to the edge where it's going to be cutting the seam. So basically about right here where this kind of where the meaty part is, like right there where all the fabric kind of folds together, but not too far, otherwise it's going to start unraveling. So you want to be careful about that. And this jacket, Marko's jacket in the movie, you can see it. It's pretty tore up. There's strings going everywhere. It's kind of falling apart. And that's how it's supposed to look. It's supposed to be this kind of mishmash of just different, fabrics and patches. And there's supposed to be like fraying going all over the place. In a video I had watched on YouTube, a different one just about fraying the coats for fraying jackets. You basically want to cut through the meaty part here. So cut that off, and then if you look, and I only know this because I watched someone else do it in another video, but you're going to have all these different layers here, see? So when you start, and the end goal here is after you cut all the edges off, you're going to want to wash it a few times and get it kind of worn, and all these different layers are going to start fraying really bad. And as you can see here, hopefully you can see that, you can see that the stitching is still intact along here, so it's not going to start coming apart. It's just going to be right here. It's going to start fraying. And it's the same idea on the other cuff, and then on the bottom too. We're going to remove that. So let me do that next. Let's do the other cuff. And make sure you get yourself a nice sharp set of fabric scissors. I had some other ones and they kind of just got worn out. And like I said, you're probably wondering like, oh, well, isn't the arms going to be too short? Especially on someone like me, like with long arms. And the answer is no. And mainly because the tapestries, for one, go kind of a little ways past there. But also the motorcycle gloves, those are like almost come up to here, up your forearm. So they kind of hide the rest of where the jacket isn't. In the next video, when I do the tapestries too, I'll have washed this a few times by then so you can see the way it's starting to fray on the edges and everything. So that arm is done. And let's go ahead and tackle the bottom now. You got to remove all these inside pockets as well, so I'll do that at the end here. And let me flip around. I wonder if it'll be easier to see. Let me come over here. Maybe a little bit. Same principle, you're going to cut across here, this thicker part. And this is going to take a minute just because of how long this is, but it's the same idea. Just cut through the thick part, just on the lower part of it though, so you don't cut the seam. And this jacket's supposed to be kind of falling apart and look sort of ratty, so if you make a mistake, it's not going to be the end of the world. And like I said, there's the other buttons that kind of have this little tab on the back. You're going to be cutting that off, so you don't really need to remove it with the wire cutters. It's a little harder to cut through this part just because that's how thick it is the material is all kind of gathered together where it's sewn, so I can fold it over, but I'm not cutting any of this, the actual stitching that's holding this whole thing together. So the second you do that, the whole thing starts unraveling and you're gonna have a huge mess. All right, there's that piece. So this is where we're at so far. All the buttons have been removed and we've cut off the bottom. This is going to start fraying once you've washed it a couple times and dry it. And then both of the cuffs are gone. And now we're going to go ahead and remove the pockets. So let's start there. Oh, there we go. A little easier to see. So for this pocket, I'm going to go ahead and just cut probably straight across right here. And it's the same principle. You don't want to cut through that. That's where the stitching's at. You just want to cut as much of this off as you can without actually cutting any of the main body stitching. And this fabric here is a lot thinner on the pocket, so that's kind of nice too. So just cut that right off like that. And I'm trying to remember, you know, this, yeah, that's just, you want to leave that there. And then we're going to cut across this pocket, same thing on this side. So that one's gone. Okay, so we got those two removed. Both the front pockets are gone, and all the tapestries are going to be sewn, you know, over this area. So, you know, it doesn't look great now, of course, because there's nothing there. But once all this is going to get covered up, so you don't have to worry about like it looking like meh. Okay, so those are removed, and now we're going to turn to the inside here. All right, so from here we're going to go ahead and remove this bottom pocket, which is kind of big, and this jacket's going to get hot with all the layers that it has. So you want to remove this one, and then over here you got the opposite side, another one, and you can just cut those off. Just don't cut any of the stitching that's holding the jacket together, and you should be okay. I'd start by going on the edge here because this is going to give you access to the other side. Make it a little easier to cut it. This part's thinner, so it's going to fold. You're going to be able to fold it right over like that. And then you can cut along the bottom. This is along the bottom edge. All this is hidden inside, so you don't have to worry too much about that part. And it's going to be able to fold over like that, and you're going to want to just remove this whole piece on both sides. And I'm not sure if this is like the perfect way to do this. This is from the outside, and I removed the pocket on the inside just with the scissors, slowly cutting around there. The pocket's gone. I left this little bit here because these were the, you know, this was the fabric that kind of was holding together the edging, so I didn't want to remove that completely. I think it would just leave a little too much damage, but you can do that however you want. If you want to remove it completely, you can. This is a tiny little bit, but should be fine. And I'm going to hit the other side now. And like I said, you're going to want to, here's the pocket. You're going to want to probably start cutting first along this long seam to make it easier to get your hands and the scissors in there. Cut along the bottom here across, and then I basically cut up this way and then cut the edge of that off too. So all right, we got that. And same thing, we're just going to cut across here. And let's see where we're at. So we got this piece here. So this is kind of folded over. And we're going to go ahead and cut this off. You know, the fact is, in the end, this is going to be fraying badly. So cutting these pockets up don't sweat it too much. I mean, it's kind of, you know, trying to figure out how to do it the perfect way. I don't think there really is a perfect way, but, you know, I've left most of the important parts on here just because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to chance it really starting to come apart, but this should be enough that it eliminates the inside, so it kind of loosens up the fit on the inside, and it's not quite as hot later on. And this is what I ended up with. This little bit of fabric, actually, I'm going to remove that too. So we'll cut that off. And you could probably use a seam ripper to remove, you know, you can see where the pocket's stitched on here. It's like right here and here. And actually, this is like a little flap that kind of just, from the other side, it looks like it just sort of covers, you know, the inside. And you could probably remove it all together, this whole part. I'll probably leave it for now, but maybe I'll go through with the seam ripper later and kind of take that off. So to reiterate, we removed the cuffs, we removed the bottom hem, and the inside pockets. And that's what you needed to do to get set up to attach all the patches and the tapestries. And we're going to go over the tapestries in part 2 of this series. And thus ends part 1 of the Marko Lost Boys Jacket DIY. So this is what we ended up with. We've got the vintage Levi's in the size 40. We removed the cuffs on the bottom up to where the seam's going to be. You don't want to cut the seam off, like I said. We cut the bottom cuff off too, the bottom of the jacket. We removed the outside pockets right here. And then we also removed the inside pockets. This piece is removed. And then that's going to set you up so that you can go ahead and get the tapestries attached. And I'm going to go over those in part 2 of the video next week. And then after that, I think I'm trying to collect a couple more of the patches before I do that video. And I actually have the Chariot Lady tapestry as well. So if you're building a jacket yourself and you've been collecting pieces and you have extra vintage patches that you might want to trade for, I'll have some of the extra collar from the Chariot Lady, which will be original. I'm of course going to use the top piece for mine, but I'll have the other three sides, and I told someone I was going to hook them up with the third piece, so there'll be 2 left over. So if you have any of the vintage patches and you want to reach out to me and maybe do a trade, just let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this first part of the series. If you're interested in making your own Marko jacket, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys for the next part.